My name is Joel, and I'm one of the pastors around here. Hello. Hello. You guys having a good weekend so far? Good. Notice I said so far. We're not over yet. It's not over yet. Our family made it out to the Medieval Festival yesterday out in Kimberley. It was fantastic. It was really cool. I have Viking heritage, so I'm like pretty biased to stuff like that, I guess, but it was great. I get the privilege of sharing with us this morning, and my friend Sheldon will be up here in a few minutes, the dashing brother of mine, Sheldon. Also want to let you know as we get started that Connect Church has an app, and we actually put some stuff on it every once in a while, so you should check it out. You can download it on the App Store, and in the app, the very first thing in the app says this week's message, and we actually took some time to put some notes in there. A couple of the points that we'll cover today, some of the scriptures are in there, so you can check that out. It stays live kind of through the week, so you can take your own notes in there and save it. So we just wanted to make you aware of the Connect Church app. Well, this morning we are continuing our summer teaching series called Pressure Points, walking through the book of James in the Bible, piece by piece. There'll be different communicators every week, teaching in pairs, challenging us, encouraging us, and walking us through the hard, pressure point causing teachings of James. Have you ever experienced pressure before? Like real pressure. Like when the weight of the world is on you. It's hard to breathe. It's hard to have perspective. It's hard to have perspective, let alone to move forward. You're in the eye of the storm. In my experience, many of these experiences for me have had something to do with real estate. I don't know what it is, but it just always seems to come down to the wire. We got the banks, we got the lawyers, we got the realtors, we got the buyers, the sellers, the timeline. I remember a couple years ago we were putting our house up for sale before we went on our sabbatical van trip and drove around like crazy. I actually got little Volkswagen vans on my shirt today. Anyways, before we went on the trip, and it was getting down to the wire. We were supposed to leave in about a month, and we were just in the process of like, okay, let's just take our house off the market because it's not going to sell. And then out of the blue, this lady came, and she made an offer on our house, and we were just like, bah! And the timeline for the offer was the conditions would come off Monday, and we were scheduled to leave Tuesday. So the house would basically sell or not sell the day before we left, and it was super stressful, and it was crazy, and sure enough, the house all went through, and the realtor actually put the sold sign on our house like not even 24 hours before we got in our van and pulled out of town. It was a little bit crazy. Now, I wish that James wrote the book of James specifically for the pressure points of real estate, because I think maybe there's some of us in this room that would really find that helpful. But what James is addressing is a little bit of a different kind of pressure. What he speaks to us is the pressure of the world in trying to live out and follow the teachings of Jesus. It's the pressure points of where the rubber hits the road and whether we're actually going to follow Jesus. A quick backstory for us. James in the Bible is listed as the brother of Jesus. So there's a few different takes on whether he's a half-brother, a full brother, whether he's older or younger, it comes from Joseph had another family or whatever. There's a couple different ways that might have happened, but nevertheless, James is the brother of Jesus. Now, this is really important as we approach this book, because I don't know about you, but I have a sister. I don't have a brother, but I have a sister. And if at some point in my life I start walking around and telling people that I'm the Son of God, and I have come to save the world, my sister for sure will be the first person to call my bluff. For absolutely. My parents probably close second, but my sister knows as good as anybody that there's no way that I am the Son of God here to save. So to be very clear, I'm not saying that. Not at all. But to be clear, I think my sister would be the first person to call my bluff. You see, because we grew up together. There's no way the Son of God would have treated my sister the way that I treated her at times. You know what I'm talking about? So James was the brother of Jesus, and he was a leader. So it's not even that he was just kind of going along with this, like, my brother is the Son of God thing. He was actually a leader in it. He actually would tell people and continually point people to his own brother. Kind of crazy. They say that James and Peter were the leaders of the church of Jerusalem. Now, if you're familiar with the church of Jerusalem, it was kind of the first church, like the first church ever. Like we talk oftentimes about Acts 2, that more than likely was about Jerusalem, was actually about the church that Peter and James led. So James was this brother of Jesus, but he was also an important leader. And what we find James doing in this book is we find him writing a message. It's kind of like this. He's trying to write a message to the followers of Jesus of the time, encouraging them, challenging them, and teaching them what it really means to follow Jesus. Now, scholars say that James's first audience, so this is important because we need to know why he wrote the book and who he was writing to. His first audience were what they would refer to as Messianic Jews. So basically what that would have meant is that there were Jewish people at the time. Even Jesus was actually a Jew. Anyways, there was Jewish people at the time, and the Messianic Jews basically believed that Jesus was the Messiah. They believed that Jesus was the Son of God. So they were still culturally Jewish. They grew up Jewish, but they were now trying to follow Jesus. They believed he was who he said he was. And James was writing to these people. And what he was specifically trying to do was trying to give them a new code. He was trying to give them a new kind of rules to live by. This past week, I was checking out a little bit of a book called 12 Rules for Life. There's a book written by a clinical psychologist and Professor Jordan P. Peterson, and it came out, and it's a bestseller. And basically what it is, they're kind of his 12 rules for life. And I've actually noticed on podcasts and blogs and different things, there's lots of different people that are coming out with their rules for life. It's sort of these quirky, witty, funny, profound, sort of like, hey, do this every day and you'll be a monster success. And essentially, when it boils down, that's what James was doing for us. He was trying to give us this new rules for life, and specifically to these to these Jewish followers of Jesus, because they had all of the rules for life. In the Old Testament, the Jewish people, they had all sorts of rules. They're referred to as the Torah, which can be the 5 books of the Bible, or all of the Jewish teachings. And they had all of these rules, all of these standards to live by. And then Jesus comes onto the scene, James's brother. Jesus comes on the scene, and he gives them 1, 2. He kind of does that. So basically, some scholars come to Jesus and they say, what's the most important rule? What's the most important commandment there is? And Jesus replies, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So love God. And then he says, this is the first and greatest commandment. And then he says, and the second is like it, which I think is awesome. So if Jesus is going to respond to a question, he's going to break the question just because he has to. But he said the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law, all of the rules of the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. And essentially what James was doing is he was looking at these two rules that Jesus gave us, these 2 commandments, and he was trying to kind of break that down a little bit further. The funny thing is he actually does that in about 12 different themes in the book of James, and 12 things that we'll cover over the course of the summer. Some of those ideas are, he covers topics like favoritism, having genuine faith, about taming your tongue or being intentional about your words, about condemning others, about true and false wisdom, the arrogance of wealth, the danger of wealth, restoring others, faith-filled prayer, telling the truth, and patience and endurance. These are these rules to live by that James is giving us. You see, all of these rules hold within them a pressure point. Because I think they're all actually quite simple in concept, but at times brutally hard to follow out. Now, to kick us off this morning, in James 1, James centers on a very simple but profound teaching. It says in James 1, verse 22, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word and does not do what it says is someone who looks in the mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But whoever looks intently at this perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they've heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in all that they do. This very simple and yet profound teaching. What it says is, don't just listen to the teachings of Jesus and fool yourselves. Do what it says. James actually goes on to expand this idea later in James 4. He says, if anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is a sin for them. He's saying it's not enough for us to just think about it. We have to do it. Do you feel that pressure? A number of years ago, I felt that pressure. I was working at Kootenai Granite at the time, and part of my job at Kootenai Granite is I would travel around to people's homes, and I would meet with them, and they'd basically give me the plan, kind of the layout of what they want to do with the house, and then I would measure it. I would template it. And I had this sort of like laser tripod-y kind of thing. It was pretty wild. Anyways, but sometimes what I'd have to do at a house is they would have existing countertop, and it would have kind of one of those rollover backsplashes. So the countertop kind of continued up the wall. And sometimes what I'd need to do to make sure I measured it really good is I would rip that little edge piece off so I could measure right to the drywall and it would fit perfect. And I was at a very important customer's house. This person had done a ton of business with us over the years, and this was like a super, super important job. And I remember I was chiseling out these backsplash pieces, and it was super sketchy. And anyways, I'm pulling on this piece. I had chiseled it out enough to get my hand behind it, and I'm pulling on this piece, and a section of that backsplash snapped off, flew through the air. A screw happened to be sticking out of the back of it, and it landed right on the hardwood floor. So I took a breath, thought, not a big deal at all, not a big deal. Walked over to the piece of backsplash, lifted it up, and it had chipped out about a penny size junk. I don't know any other word to better describe that, but junk out of the hardwood floor. And I'm like looking at this thing going like, oh man, like what in the world am I gonna do? So I tried to figure out if I could like glue the piece back in, but it had kind of splintered into 100 million pieces. But I tried to figure out if there's a way I could glue it, and I had a Sharpie in my pocket. Maybe I could like just touch it up with Sharpie or something. I don't know, like I was trying to process. I was kind of like reeling, like what in the world could I possibly do with this? And honestly, I'm not telling this story as necessarily a good story. I probably spent a half an hour thinking about what in the world I was going to do about this. If you're familiar with hardwood, if they couldn't actually find that piece, they would likely, if this customer was really upset about it, they would have to rip up the entire floor, maybe of the entire kitchen, if not the kitchen that extended to the living room and the front entryway. And I was like, oh, I'm fired for sure. So I'm processing this, and finally at the end of the day, I even remember praying about it. I was like, God, maybe there's, like, you could heal this thing. I put my hand on it. I don't know. But, I'm praying and trying to figure out what to do, and I decided, the customer wasn't home at the time, so I decided to write a letter, and I drew an arrow, and I placed it on the floor so she knew what had happened. And I left it, and I tried to call the customer. I couldn't get a hold of her, so I left this letter. The next day, I was in the shop, and I was working on a few things, and I saw her walk in the front door. And I saw her walk directly to my boss. And I remember I died inside. I was like, oh, this is terrible. And she talked passionately with my boss for a while, and then turned to walk out. And I was kind of like, I wasn't like lingering, like I wasn't wasting time, obviously. But I was kind of wanted to be in the same vicinity. Like I just was kind of curious, so I was kind of lingering a bit. And just as she turned to walk out, she actually caught me out of the corner of her eye, and she walks over to me, and I'm like, oh, this is worse. I should have hidden better. And she comes over to talk to me, and she asked a couple questions about the job. And I was like, yeah. And I just sort of answered the couple questions about the job. And then she turned to leave. And just as she went to turn to leave, she said, oh, hey, like I took a look at the divot in the floor or whatever. Not a big deal. We just started having, not her choice, but she just started having grandkids. So she has some grandkids now. And they're going to do much worse than I ever could. And just turned and walked out the front door. And I was like, what just happened? Like, I was so dumbfounded and realized that she wasn't actually talking to my boss about why I should be fired. She was just sort of like, it was all good. It was all chill. Now, once again, I don't tell this story as some sort of self-righteous, like, oh man, look at me doing what is right. I tell this story because I felt the pressure. You see, following Jesus in that moment was more than a belief. It was something to walk out as hard as it was in that moment. Honestly, I would say that moment has changed me. That moment changed the way that I think about situations like that. I think in some way or another, we've all felt that kind of pressure. We've had a moment or an experience like that, maybe not with backsplashes, but we've had moments like that. It was even like at Ty Lake this past weekend. I told my daughter, I was having battles with her all day about wearing her life jacket. She was swimming with some girls that were older than her, and they didn't have to wear life jackets, so we were having this battle about life jackets. My daughter's 6. I wasn't there. She needed to wear a life jacket. And then finally she gives in. She says, fine, I'll wear my life jacket. Grabs the life jacket and takes off down the trail to go swimming with her friends. And I thought to myself, I wonder if she's going to put the life jacket on. Now, I thought that to myself because I wouldn't have put the life jacket on. For sure. So I actually made the walk down the trail to the little swimming spot, actually honestly praying, God, please just have her put the life jacket on. I don't I just don't want to have to deal with that. Anyways, come around the corner, of course, she's swimming without the life jacket on. I'm like, come on! Anyways, moments like that where we know what we're supposed to do, but we wrestle with whether or not we're going to do anything about it at all. This is what James is speaking about. Don't just merely listen to the word. Don't merely listen to the way and teachings of Jesus and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Alan Hirsch, an author, pastor, and crazy thinker, wrote this quote, wrote this idea that's really stuck with me, and I come back to again and again and again. And he said this: we do not think ourselves into new ways of living. We live ourselves into new ways of thinking. This is going to be really important for us. So I'm just going to say that one more time, just let you process that a little bit. We do not think ourselves into new ways of living. We live ourselves into new ways of thinking. Here's the challenge for us right here at the beginning of this series of James. Well, it was last week, but we're kind of continuing the beginning right now. Here's the challenge for us in this series. We need to diminish the gap between our thinking and our practicing. We need to diminish the gap when it comes to following Jesus between thinking about him and actually walking out the life that he calls us to walk out. You see, a lot of us think about faith or think about following Jesus as a belief. It's just an idea. It's a way of thinking about the world. But it isn't just that. It's a practice. It's a reorientation. It's a life lived. You see, Jesus didn't just call us to think about him. He called us to follow him, to walk in his ways. So what we need to do is we need to diminish this gap between thinking and practicing and actually follow Jesus. Here's a way of looking at it. My kids yesterday are fascinated with bugs. And they came up with this little bug house yesterday. And what they did is the sun was nice and hot on the one wall of our house, so they ran around and they grabbed daddy long-legged spiders and they stuffed them in this little home. And they gave them dirt and grass and all sorts of stuff. But there's a few nasty daddy long-legged spiders hiding in this home. Now, bravery or boldness or confidence or just sheer stupidity would say that what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this bug house, I'm going to pull out one of the spiders, and I'm going to eat it on stage. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I would do if I was bold or stupid or confident or whatever. That's what I would do, right? And you'd say that would be a pretty bold or confident or crazy choice, would you? Maybe boldness or confidence would say, maybe I shouldn't do it. Where's Sheldon? He's speaking today. Where's Sheldon at? Sheldon, are you here? He's sitting over there. Maybe boldness would actually say, hey, Sheldon, can you come on stage for me and eat one of these spiders in this bug house for me on stage? Would you do that for me today? He said, bring it back here. The thing is that might seem like boldness or stupidity or confidence or whatever, but in reality, it isn't. What would actually be bold or courageous or brave or stupid or whatever would be to actually open the bug house and to reach my hand to reach my hand inside and find the little guy and to eat him on stage. Do you understand what I'm saying? No, you don't. What I'm saying is that it's not enough to just think about it. It's not even enough to just say it on stage. Hey, look how bold I am. I would eat a spider on stage in front of everyone. What boldness is, what confidence is, what courage is to actually do it. Now, I'm not going to do it this morning, but the illustration still plays through. It would only be bold if I actually did it. Not just thinking about it, but practicing it. So this morning, what we're going to do is we're going to have a quick time of questions. I'm going to throw 3 questions up on the screen, and I would encourage you to have a conversation with a couple people around you on a couple of these ideas, or maybe just think about it for yourself for a couple minutes. And then Sheldon is going to come up and lead us in James's first 12 rules for living, and that today is avoid favoritism. So our 3 questions this morning are, have you ever felt the pressure of knowing what you should do and choosing whether or not you would do it? Second question, what do you think of the idea of we do not think ourselves into new ways of living, we live ourselves into new ways of thinking? And number 3, would you eat the spider? Talk about that for a couple minutes, and then Sheldon will be up.
Well, hello. Sorry, funny little thing about that spider story that Joel was just doing with the spider. He said, when I was in the back, he said, bring it back here. No, I didn't say bring it back here. I said, I'm good back here. One thing my wife knows that some of you might not know is I don't like spiders. I just don't. And it was really funny when he presented this idea of eating a spider, because even yesterday, we had a spider on our roof in our house. And our roof isn't super tall, but it's tall enough for me to touch it. So she went to go kill it. And then she's like, wait, I have to jump to kill it. Maybe you should kill it. And then I went to go reach for it, and instead of hitting it and crushing it, it fell. And it was one of those moments where it was like, and I just looked at her, and she's like, well, kill it. And it's like, well, where did it go? And she goes, under the garbage can. And we moved the garbage can, and it was gone. And it's like one of those moments where it's like, all right, let's just light a match, and we'll leave it to fate. Said we left the house. We're probably going to be killed by a spider one of these nights as it's on our pillow, but that's beyond the point. I think one of my favorite things about being on stage today is that I actually get to share the stage with Joel. I really like that guy. He's awesome. But one thing you guys don't quite realize is how awesome this moment is to see both of us on stage within the same little process. 2 very, very handsome guys on stage at once is just sometimes a bit of an overload. We look very similar. We wear the same glasses, or very, very much exact same glasses. We both got beards. Obviously, they're different lengths right now. Joel's is shorter, mine is longer. Maybe they're not. Maybe his is an illusion, or mine's a clip-on. You will never know. But there is a significant difference between Joel and I. See, I am a Marvel fan, and he is a DC fan. That pretty much sums it up right there. I'm sorry. No, they're not. So he is a Batman fan. I am a Captain America fan. I would just like to say Batman is cool before you guys boo again. I don't know. Batman is cool. He's got his tech. He's got his martial arts. He's got his money. But I would like to say I do believe somewhere in the Bible it does say the love of money is the root of evil. Just saying, I don't know if loving Batman's the exact same as that, but I don't know. Captain America, he's honorable, he's outspoken, he's usually a pretty nice guy, he's super strong, he's got a wicked immune system, he's patriotic. Look at this, I just got a way bigger list for Captain America than I do for Batman, obviously, because I like him better. Both Marvel and DC, though, do a great job on comic books and movies. But it is my personal opinion to favoritize over Marvel. I favoritize it in the sense that I will choose a Marvel movie over any other movie or any genre movie anytime, because I would rather watch that than something else. In James chapter 2, as Joel mentioned, it talks about this pressure point or this sin that God hates, and I think most of us hate it. It's always in the back of our mind, maybe just a little bit, if not in full force for what it truly is. It's the idea of favoritism. The idea of giving someone or something more attention, time, heart, or soul just because of its appearance, appeal, background, or many other factors. Most of us don't want to admit that we have a sense of partiality or favoritism because really it sounds terrible. It sounds terrible that we would favoritize a human being because of wealth or something else, but in reality, I think we all struggle with it in some sense. See, the other night I was working on this message, and I was really picking my brain, and I was laying in bed really learning how to stress all at once. And I don't deal with stress very well. I don't stress a lot, but when I do, I don't cope with it super well. In my mind, I was stressing about a few different things. I was stressing about, I've got a friend with a wedding coming up pretty quick here, and I was stressing about that, even though I've got no purpose in stressing about that. I was also stressing about my lawn because I haven't been watering it as much this year, and it doesn't look as good. And I was also stressing about this. I was stressing about this message and being on stage and being in front of you guys. All of that on a work night. I actually tossed and turned for quite a few hours making adjustments on my laptop, watching YouTube videos to distract myself, completely ignoring the fact that I actually needed to sleep. I needed to sleep so that I would be awake and alert at work the next day. I was choosing, without even thinking about it, to favoritize work over sleep. To favoritize stress over sleep, over my health. I put sleep and my health at the bottom of my needs that night when really I could have used it. See, in James chapter 2, verse 2, it says, "Suppose a man comes into your meeting wearing a gold ring and fine clothes, and a poor man in filthy old clothes also comes in. If you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes and say, 'Here is a good seat for you,' but you say to the poor man, 'You stand there or sit on the floor by my feet,' have you not discriminated amongst yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts?" See, we put things into categories. We do it just like that without even realizing it. We might not say to somebody, "You come sit at my feet," because that would just be a next level rude. But we do it in the back of our minds. Why is it wrong to judge a person by his or her economic status? Wealth may indicate intelligence, wise decisions, or hard work. But on the other hand, it may mean a person had the good fortune of being born into a wealthy family, or could even be a sign of greed, or dishonesty, or selfishness. By honoring someone just because he or she dresses well, we are making appearance more important than character. He calls us judges in this verse because we're determining who's more important by what he possesses, or this person is less important because he has less. Favoritism can even go as far as focusing closely on the people around you and not to the people who are new to the situation or new to the area that you're in, or maybe people that need help or just need someone to talk to. We don't see them because we aren't looking for them. Joel brought up Matthew 5 earlier in the transition, and he said, he brought up this idea of being perfect. Right before that, in Matthew 5, verses 46 through 47, it says, if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? This concept sometimes can be hard for us to grasp because it is a natural occurrence amongst us. Without even trying, we favoritize our world. We put things into categories, we put things on the back burner that we don't believe we need to focus on at that time. But in reality, we need to bring some of those things close to our attention. If we look back on the verse 3 that I brought up earlier in James 2, it says, if you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes, and say, here's a good seat for you, but say to the poor man, you stand there or sit at my feet. I think in that verse, we may not totally understand the total value of that verse. Because, like I've said, we do it without trying, but we may not realize it. Or we may not realize the impact that we're doing when we do these things to these people. See, when I was in middle school, I wasn't the most popular kid, and I wasn't also the toughest kid, and people knew it. I remember this one gym class that stuck with me for a long time, and I don't know why it stuck to me. It doesn't bother me now, but we were in gym class, and it was dodgeball day, which if you know dodgeball day, it's like the best day in gym class. So we got into the two teams. Teacher separated us into separate teams. And we went to our sides, and it wasn't until the game started that I realized what had happened. I looked across the gym, and I looked at the other team, and I realized that the other team was mostly people that were my enemies, or mostly people that didn't like me or didn't appreciate me. I didn't realize totally the situation that was about to happen, but in the next few minutes, I would realize what was going on. So the first round of dodgeball happened, and within the first 30 seconds, I was totally pummeled with dodgeballs. And I was doing the natural thing where when you're out, you sit down. So I went to go sit down, and I realized that a few other balls hit me as I was going down, not thinking much about it because maybe someone just threw a ball late. Didn't realize it was going to hit me. So that round ended, and we stood up again, and the second round started, and it happened again. Within the first few seconds, tons and tons of dodgeballs hit me, and I went down, and as I was going down, they continued to hit me. And it was the third round that it really clicked in what was going on when the same thing happened again. And I was getting very mad, like my blood was boiling, but there was also like a sense of defeat. By the end of the third round, the teacher had realized what was going on, and she looked to a friend of mine, and she told him to take me for a walk. So we went for a walk around the school while she talked to the rest of the kids. But I just remember in that feeling, that sense of being put down, what it can feel like to be put lower than someone else. To show favoritism towards someone and tell them to sit at your feet is identically this situation. It's that feeling of like total defeat inside. In James chapter 2, verses 13, it says, because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. But it's this end part of this verse that really sticks out. It says, mercy triumphs over judgment. Mercy triumphs over judgment. It's really easy for us to favoritize things. We can favoritize our life by our likes, like how I favoritize Marvel over DC. Or maybe you favoritize soccer over hockey. Maybe you're like pumped over the FIFA Cup right now and not the Stanley Cup a couple months ago. Or maybe you favoritize TV or movies. That's okay. That's human nature. We're bound to do that. We're bound to put things into categories. It helps us find our hobbies. It helps us find our greatest desires. We can also favoritize our life by our emotions. Like we put stress or worry first in front of our health or our sleep. Or we can favoritize people in our life, like maybe family or friends. Without even trying, when we favoritize people, we're telling people to sit at our feet. We're telling them to go away because we don't want to deal with them. We want to deal with the person with the gold ring and the fine clothes. But how do we fix this? I keep saying that it's human nature. We're bound to do it. We're bound to think it. It's always going to be in the back of our mind. So how do we fix this idea? We make a decision to work on change. I'm not saying change, because that's not going to happen. And don't change like who you are as a person. Just change how you kind of show people love. You love everyone you come into contact with. Maybe that's as little as shaking everybody's hand. Or maybe that's as little as making eye contact whenever somebody is talking to you. Or being as intentional as you can in every situation. In Mark 12, verses 31, it says, love your neighbor as yourself. It's just another expression of pushing that love to not show favoritism. If you're thinking on a sad day that you might just want ice cream or pizza, maybe that person just wants an ice cream or pizza. Maybe it's your chance to buy them something little like an ice cream or a slice of pizza. If you think sometimes you just need to talk to someone, like not like a moment where you need to like spill your heart, but just talk to someone. Maybe there's someone else that needs that as well. Maybe you just need to give that time to someone else. Favoritism can be combated with love itself. That's easy. That's all it's got to be. And it's not going to happen right away. It's going to take time. But showing God's love through your actions to the ones around you is the best way to do it. So I'm actually going to turn it back over to Joel for the end of this.
Thanks, buddy. I love that guy. We have a serious bromance going on. That's why we dress alike, because we like looking at ourselves in the mirror, so that works out good. That's a ridiculous comment. Yeah, I don't practice favoritism with Sheldon, though, I promise. Now, as we close, I just want to encourage us to sort of take it back to the start a little bit. So this quote from Alan Hirsch, this idea that we do not think ourselves into new ways of living, we live ourselves into new ways of thinking. So if we're going to diminish the gap between our thinking and our practicing this week, the questions for us become, how are we going to avoid favoritism, as Sheldon was talking about at the end there? How this week are we going to avoid it? How are we going to practice following Jesus in a more inclusive way? One of the ways that we can do that, and we see this idea right in Matthew 5, is who are you going to love this week that won't be able to love you back? Who are you going to love this week that won't be able to love you back? I'm not saying that all your relationships should look like that. I actually think it would be quite destructive if it did. But the question for us becomes, how are we actually going to live out the selfless love of Jesus? Earlier during transition, I read a couple verses from the Message, but I want to read us that whole passage again, just as we close, because it sort of holds some things within it I think that will speak to us as we take off from here. In Matthew 5:43-48, it says, "You're familiar with the old written law. Love your friend and its unwritten companion. Hate your enemy. I'm challenging that." This is Jesus speaking. "I'm telling you to love your enemies. Let them bring out the best in you, not the worst. When someone gives you a hard time, respond with energies of prayer. For then you are working out of your true selves, your God-created selves. This is what God does. He gives his best, the sun to warm and the rain to nourish, to everyone regardless, the bad and the good, the nice and the nasty. If all you do is love the lovable, do you expect a bonus? Anyone can do that. If you simply say hello to those who greet you, do you expect a medal? Any run-of-the-mill sinner does that. And then, like I read this morning, in a word, what I'm saying is, grow up. Your kingdom subjects, now live like it. Live out your God-created identity. Live generously and graciously toward others the way God lives towards you. So my question, again, is how, even this week, maybe as you take off from here, as you think about it, or have a conversation with someone before you take off, how this week are you going to take steps to avoid favoritism? And like I said, maybe who this week are you going to love that might never be able to love you back? Let's pray. God, as we reflect on, God, some of these pressure points in our life, and God, favoritism is a tough one. It does seem, as Sheldon said, it does seem to come naturally to us. But God, I pray that you would help us live out of the identity that you've created us with. God, I pray that we would not just think about following Jesus this week, but we'd actually put it into practice. And God, I pray that we wouldn't even need to think about it too much, but God, we could just love like you love this week. God, any situation, any encounter, any conversation, God, that we would just have your words, we would have your actions. God, that we would just love like you do. God, help us to do that. Help us to live out of the true identity that you've created for us. God, we love you and praise you. Amen. Amen.